Flip resets are one of the most glorified mechanics in all of Rocket League. Any Rocket League highlights video nowadays is bound to be filled with them, whether it's an RLCS recap or a freestyling montage. And the reason for that is because the mechanic looks insanely cool and is also incredibly useful competitively. It's the best of both worlds. In this video, I'm going to share with you the step-by-step process of how to pull off a flip reset for the first time with no experience. From there, I'll explain the different types of flip resets and how to do them, along with the most efficient ways to practice them and how to use them competitively in real game scenarios. If you'd like to follow along, feel free to use this training pack. This is the one I'll be using when I'm showing examples of the step-by-step process and how to practice it. You can just go to Custom Training and select Enter Code and put this in. It's also in the description if you want to copy and paste it. The first step to learning how to flip reset is learning how to air dribble. I know that's a pretty big step, but luckily I already have a video on that you can check out if you'd like. That link is in the description. Learning to flip reset before you can air dribble is like learning to flick before you can ground dribble. It just doesn't work. It's an essential skill to have before you start, so be sure you don't overlook it. Got it? Good. Now let's break down the step-by-step process of how to do a flip reset in its most basic form. To start, get the ball rolling toward the wall at about this angle and speed. It doesn't have to be perfect, but aim for this speed you're seeing on your screen now. If you're using the training pack, it'll already be at the perfect angle for you, so all you have to do is drive straight. Next, just before the ball rolls up the ramp, you need to create some space between the ball and your car. So tap the brakes a little to create that gap, and the ball will keep rolling at its original speed up the ramp. After that tiny brake tap to create the space, you'll need to start boosting again to catch up to the ball. This will take some timing. You want to time it so your touch on the ball happens just after the half pipe on the wall. If you touch it too early, the ball won't even pop out and the setup is basically dead. Also, make sure you're not hitting it too hard, of course. To make the flip reset easiest on yourself, you want to be hitting the ball pretty much as high as you can without it hitting the ceiling. This will definitely take some experimenting to get that touch just right, so I'd recommend getting this part down and consistent before moving on any further. Just practice getting the brake tap and the first touch perfect before you move on. It should look like this if you do it right. We're almost done with the setup here. After you get that perfect touch on the wall, you'll need to create space between the ball and your car again. You'll do this the exact same way by just lightly tapping the brakes immediately after touching the ball. This creates a nice gap that you'll use to build up momentum to get the reset itself. And during this entire setup, you should of course make sure you're on ball cam the whole time. Being on car cam will disorient you completely, so definitely don't do that. So far, these are the steps we've covered. Pushing the ball toward the wall at about this speed, then doing a small brake tap to create some space with the ball, then boosting forward again and making contact just above the half pipe, and making sure you don't hit the ball up too high. Assuming you've done everything correctly so far, at this point the setup is completely finished. Now for the truly hard part. The next step is where you'll find a ton of difficulty. Up until now, everything we've done has just been the exact same thing as an air dribble setup. But what comes next is what makes a flip reset a flip reset. Start by jumping, boosting, and air rolling all at the same time. The position you need to reach next is right here. The nose of your car should be pointing directly at the ball just like it would on an air dribble. But instead of seeing the roof of your car, you're looking at the underside. Obviously, this is much more difficult because you're controlling your car upside down. This is what it should look like if you do it correctly. If you're struggling with this part, try going into free play and just practice the movement without the ball until you can get it consistent. Continuing on, you need to continue boosting directly at the ball. As you approach it, assuming you got your setup correctly, the ball should start to lose its upward momentum and be reaching its apex, or its peak. The perfect timing for when you want to make contact with the ball for the reset is right after the apex. The timing is key here. As you're about to reach the ball, now is the time for you to tilt forward at the last moment and place your underside on the ball. This contact right here is by far the hardest part. Here are some key things to remember about this touch. When you're trying to get the reset, you need to have momentum as you fly into it. That's why we did that brake tap on the wall. It gave us the space we needed to build that momentum so we're not just chasing it from 2 inches away in the air. It also allowed us to make contact after the apex, which, as I said, is the easiest point to get the reset. When you get the reset after its peak, it's more like you and the ball are colliding, which is exactly what you want, rather than you just chasing it down and catching up to it. As you may have guessed, there's a specific spot on your car where you should be trying to get the reset from. That spot, though, will of course vary depending on the car that you're using. A flip reset in the game files is defined by when the player lands all 4 wheels on the ball. Not to get too deep into specifics here, but each car actually has wheels relative to their hitbox. And they don't usually line up with where the wheels are visually on the car. So here you can see visually the wheels are way off from where they actually are on the hitbox. So I don't normally like telling people to use the wheels as the indicator. Instead, I prefer to aim for the center of mass. You can find the center of mass on any car by going upside down and spinning in a circle. That center point where your car is spinning around is the exact point where you want to get your reset from, and you'll notice it's not actually right in the center of the car, which is totally fine. When you get the reset by aiming for the center of mass, your car just bounces off in a way that makes it really easy to recover. The ideal angle to hit the ball is usually right about here. You don't want to be directly underneath it because your ball cam is going to go crazy and you usually lose control. And you don't want to get it from directly behind because at that point it's hard to get back underneath it for the touch again. This angle right in between is the perfect balance. Okay, that's a lot of detail about this one touch. This is why flip resets are so difficult. You need to be so precise or else you'll easily lose control and won't be able to do anything with it. So once we get to this point, there are two different types of flip resets we can do. The first one is the delayed flip reset. This type of flip reset, I would recommend doing whenever you can. It gives you way more control over what you do with the ball next. You can flip into it normally with your nose, you can turn your car over and go for a tail sort of hit, you can turn it into a musty, or you can even fake it and not hit it at all. A big reason why we wanted our setup to be as high in the air as possible is because it gives us more time to delay it. And if you delay your reset for a really long time, then it becomes even more deadly and hard to read. When you do a delayed flip reset, you just have way more options. The second one is the flip reset flick. This type is a lot easier when you're first starting out because there's really only one thing you can do with it. Instead of getting the reset and delaying it, you use your flip the instant you get it, which flings the ball a bit forward. I don't recommend this one as much because it's way less consistent in terms of how much power you get on it, and it's a lot harder to place it exactly where you want. I only use this specific type if I'm getting the reset really close to the ground and I don't have any time to delay it, or if the opponent is challenging me early and they're just going to dunk me if I don't get rid of it fast. Otherwise, the delayed flip reset gives me so much more control and is way harder for the defense to read. Okay, now that we've gone through the step-by-step process, let's cover the best way to practice these from beginner to advanced. When you're learning flip resets for the first time and really trying to get the motion down, I highly recommend using this training pack that I mentioned earlier. It gives you a consistent setup every time without any variations. This is the fastest way to get reps in, which is really what it takes to get it down when you're first experimenting. Also, don't worry about scoring it when you first start, just focus on getting the reset and then hitting the ball anywhere. Once you do get the motion down and you're able to hit the ball most of the time, the next place to practice it is in free play. You can use this handy free play ball control feature to get reps in pretty quickly. Try experimenting around with different angles and setups. Try doing it at a really fast speed, try doing it at a slow speed. Although this doesn't seem that different from practicing in custom training, for most people it'll be way harder because the slight variations make all the difference. The reason I didn't go in depth on what to do after you get the reset is because there are so many variables once you get that wheel touch that you can't generalize it anymore. Especially when you're first learning, you're not going to be consistent with it, so your car is going to bounce off in totally different ways each time you get the reset. So it's something that you really have to experiment with. And that same thing applies to when you start doing it in free play. You've practiced the motion a ton already, but that doesn't mean you'll be just as good with it once minor variations are added. The next step to mastering flip resets is trying them in situations that you wouldn't normally go for. I have a training pack for this as well, and the code is on screen now. I wouldn't recommend this unless you're already super high level, like GC3 or higher, and your normal plays are getting saved in game. Because at champ and below, a normal redirect or aerial will get the job done perfectly almost every single time. And going for a flip reset in these situations would just be totally overkill. So if you're good enough to where this pack would actually be useful for you, I trust you'll use it correctly. You definitely know what you're doing at this point when it comes to training. So let's move on to how to use flip resets competitively. This section is definitely going to be the most underrated in this whole video. The big thing about flip resets is, although they're extremely difficult to defend, they're just as difficult to score, if not even more difficult. So it's important that we only use them in the situations where it's actually necessary. I guarantee you right now, there are way more people trying to learn flip resets than there should be. I made this tweet asking those of you who are diamond and below to send me clips of you hitting flip resets in game, and just as I expected, almost every single one wasn't actually a competitively viable scenario to go for a flip reset. Look at all these examples. Sure, the flip reset was cool, but did you actually need to do that in order to score it? Probably not. You could have just carried it right over the defender with a normal air dribble, or just scored the open net normally. That's so much easier. But I'm not here to force you to do what I say. If you want to learn flip resets for fun, then go for it. But just be aware that they don't become consistently necessary until you reach at least high Grand Champ. Now, with that being said, let's look at the best situations to use flip resets in. The most ideal scenario to go for a flip reset is this here. There's 2 or more defenders back. Assuming you're only going for flip resets at a high level, chances are the defense is going to do the right thing and have one player challenge and have the other cover net. A really common mistake the challenger does in this scenario is try to predict the air dribble. So they pretty much challenge you as if you're going to get multiple touches on the ball and carry it top shelf. If they challenge like that, that's perfect for you. When they do that, that allows you to get the reset, which drops it down in the process to go below the first defender. And since you have your flip now, you can basically do whatever you want with it to get it by the second defender. You go below the first and above the second. If you had tried anything else, it wouldn't have been possible to score here. The defense would have been able to cover every option of yours. But since you did a flip reset, suddenly it did become possible. You're kind of weaving your way through the defenders in the air, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. What the defense should do instead to prevent this is what I call forcing high. But that's really high level stuff and something for another time. At the low ranks, when people already struggle to defend double taps or air dribbles, that's almost always enough to score off of. Scoring a flip reset is way harder to do than scoring an air dribble. So if they both work, you might as well go for the easier way to score. At the high ranks, defenses become a lot better, so flip resets become more and more useful. There are, of course, many more ways to use flip resets competitively. A lot of the time, it can be useful if you run out of boost and you're just trying to get a little extra flick over the defender at the end. But even then, in a lot of those scenarios, especially if it's at the midfield, it's just better to take a 50 than put yourself at the risk of getting dunked. But that's about all I have for flip resets in this video. If you want to learn more stuff in Rocket League, feel free to check out my other tutorials. I've got hours worth of educational Rocket League videos on this channel already, including videos about flicks, dribbling, air dribbling, rotating, you name it. So if you want to see more of my videos when I upload them, hit subscribe so you don't miss out. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.